With us today is Mr. Grant Fines, the founder, creator, the guru behind 49 Sports Games. He was a very, very popular man at Play.con 23 this year. Couldn't get near him with all the demos he was doing, the great interest in his games. He does football, American football, Canadian football. Thank you so much, sir. Really appreciate your time today.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Thanks for having me. Yeah, man,
Also,
play.com was a blast. That was so much fun. It was fun playing the games and helping Keith out as well because he does such a great job there.
now, was that your first? No, that wasn't.
That was my first in a couple of years.
Okay.
Yeah, I was at the first couple of them way back when, pre-COVID, whenever that was. Seems like a lifetime ago, but yeah. So I hit the first couple and then took a few years off and was glad to be back at it this year.
So, for folks who weren't there or who might not have been able to connect with you there, what games were you demoing for folks?
My own games were
Yes.
so I've got football. So it's called, there's two versions of the football game. One is called on the turf football, and that replaces what was called 49 football, which I came up with back in like 2017. And I sold that for a few years. And then because of COVID and personal stuff and a different business, I just kind of put it on the back burner for a while and then came back out this year. So it's on the turf. And then the new one is called Quick Decks football. So it takes about an hour to play that game. I was also showing a hockey game. I've got a foot racing game that's more like a card game, and it's also your resources are all based around things you go through when you're running a marathon, and so it's pretty thematic that way. And I also have a golf game that I've been working on, although I don't know if that'll ever see the light of day. We'll see. I like playing it once a year when the Masters is on. So
Sure.
dabbling into lots of stuff.
What was the inspiration behind the foot racing game? Are you a marathoner?
I am a marathoner. I ran for basically, I guess, stress relief. So that was my out. And the thing I liked about running, because I've run most of my life, is, and I'm not fast, I just do it because I can really free think. I like to ride my bike, but when you're riding a bike and you're going 20 miles an hour, it's like you better be in the moment of what you're doing and you turn your brain off of everything but riding the bike. But running to me was just like go out on a trail, whether it was a road or a trail and through the woods and whatnot. It just allowed me to free think about whatever I needed to think about. So that's been my relief all my life until my knee decided a couple of years ago to say that, yeah, you ran enough. Now let's find something different to do. That's where the race came because I can't run anymore.
I noticed in one of your videos a little guitar in the background there, so a bit of a musical bent as well.
The guitar I bought for my son because he's a very good guitarist. So I like to play the piano. So I've tried to play the guitar and it just doesn't work for me. So I stick to piano. So yeah, music is there for sure.
So, how did you begin this journey, this one-man journey of sports game design, all the trials and tribulations? What have you had to navigate to get your game up and running and out in front of folks?
Wow. Yeah, there's so much to it, really. I guess I've been a serial entrepreneur all my life. So all the extra parts of it, from the accounting through the packaging, through getting suppliers and all that stuff, it's a little bit second nature because that's been my business, starting small businesses. But the real it goes back to being a kid, and I think this is probably like most of us in this industry. Back when I was, 10 years old in small town Canada with 3,000 people in my town, we didn't have a game store you could go to and look at the latest Stratomatic or whatever we were dreaming of at the time. So we had just some simple board games that I started then to make my own cards for. And rolling a D6. And I remember Gayle Sayers was my favorite player back in the day because we used to get Chicago Bears games on our local station in Western Canada. And so I had Franco Harris. I just remember these two cards. Franco Harris, you roll a D6. If it was a 1, he maybe got no yards. Everything else was like 3 yards, right? Because that seemed to be what he did. But Gayle Sayers, if he rolled a 6, he got 10 yards because he was my favorite player in the mind of a 10-year-old, that's just what he got. So I guess the passion to maybe create something has always been there. Although I really didn't get started in it until I really finished my working career for the first time, around 2010. So that's when I kind of got back into it.
Usually, the life cycle of the gamer is you come back just to play the games, but you're actually going full throttle on designing the perfect game for yourself and for your folks out there.
Yeah, and the original was just to kind of create the perfect game as I wanted it to be. And I really had no intention when I started down this journey of, developing a football game or a hockey game that I would actually market it. But, I came up with 49 football, and this was, I think I started, maybe the first version was 2013. And took to 2017 before I put it on the market, which I had not intended to do, but I put a couple of pictures on, the sports game Facebook page, and just to get some feedback when people see what they thought about it. And the feedback was like, yeah, you need to let me buy that. And so I thought, okay, well, I'll do that. I'll put it out there. And so, it took a lot. It took another year after kind of figuring that out, just to make sure you have it polished enough to put it out there too.
And I love the fact that, I mean, it's pretty heavily chart based. I mean, you've got small cards and you've got bigger charts from what I've seen. At least the extended version, the on the turf of football, and I kind of find that heartening because of course play games are very much focus on the narrative,
Right.
enrobing the statistics that lie underneath. And then, of course, you got your classic APBA and Strat, which are, there are some, APBA is certainly chart heavy. Strat has some charts, more results on the card. So was that a conscious decision that, I want to use that format?
It kind of evolved to that. I think when I first started, and what got me into it was working and playing computer games and, Action PC. And I tried a couple things, got into some leagues and played with them for a while, and then just got a little bit frustrated with, that they weren't perfect. That, to me, in my perfect world, if I was to develop a football game that was going to be on the PC, I'm going to make sure that whoever's playing it gets the entire flavor of what's going on in the play with the play-by-play. I'm not going to leave it up to your mind, but on the tabletop, I'm going to leave it all up to your mind. Like this guy's got a good chance. If I just roll a 10 or better on a D20, he's going to break away. I rolled a 6. Well, what happened? Well, I got to figure it out in my mind what happened. He maybe slipped, or somebody missed a block, or somebody shot the gap really well. But in the PC game, I wanted that given to me. And I don't know if that's right or wrong, but that was just me. And so I finally kind of got tired of it a little bit. And I was starting to wind my work career down. Came across Play Games because I was forever looking for a Canadian Football League game that kind of matched what was called Sports Action Games Football League from back in the late 70s and early 80s, which that was kind of what I cut my teeth on. And I eventually came across Cold Snap with Play Games, and that was, I think, around 2009, and started to play that. And then my mind is like, this is what a great narrative game. I want more strategy. And so then I had looked at Stratomatic, and I thought, yeah, it just, one of the games I played when I was younger, well, in my 20s, I had a friend, and we'd get together, our wives, and we'd get together and played status pro football. Everybody's rated. So you got, offensive, defense, everybody's rated. It's really a pretty involved, in-depth game, but, they were 4.5 hour games to play, right? It was fun. I didn't want to have that kind of game. Although when I first started down the road, okay, I want to create my own game. I love play. I can always go back and do the play games for sure, but I want to create my own. And I looked at other ones out there, and nothing really scratched my itch of what I was thinking would be perfect, because I would still want to do it in like an hour, hour and a half, right? And so that's when I started basically from first principles. I laid out a game that took up my entire table, had every zone broken out, and it was like a perfect football game, but it would take 4 hours to play like a half, because it was too involved. But that's where I started from there. And then, okay, so what do I need to get rid of? How do I need to pare this down? What's really important in a football game? And one of the biggest decisions was doing the team charts, going with the team charts rather than individual cards. And, the other thing that I had to figure out was, do I really need to rate every offensive lineman? Because I want this to not be subjective. I want it to be like completely stats based. And you're starting to get some interesting stats now on offensive linemen, but you sure don't have that over the decades. And I love playing 70s and 80s games too, right? That's kind of how it all started and developed into something that I just kept paring down, paring down, paring down until it seemed workable. And I had a quick play version in the original 49 football that took around an hour to play.
I'm glad you segued to or that rather is a segue to one of the key questions. The idea of the emerging advanced data for the NFL and I guess for the
Mhm.
CFL as well, particularly passing data certainly is fueling the fantasy football, and then the idea of incorporating line play. This is Joe Thomas from the 2007
Yeah.
Browns here, Hall of Famer now. He gets his big 5 points out of 5 for APBA, but other than that you have to kind of create your own matchup system. So, and you've obviously dealt with that same issue. So, what are some of the other things you whittled away, and do you incorporate line play at all?
Line play does come into it, and it's all really built into the cards. So that I have two decks. There's the game action, and this is whether or not there's pressure from a defensive lineman or wherever it comes from, or if there's interceptions or whatnot. And then there's a bunch of modifiers on the results cards as well, and that's where it comes into play. It's built into the overall system. 49 football, in order to play it, you needed to be able to create an Excel spreadsheet. So this is the chart that you would generate to play 49 football. And one team is on one side, the other team is on the other. And that goes along with the team chart. And that's where all the modifiers are for how well they did against the run, how well they did against pass, and interceptions and pressure and whatnot. So it got built into there. When I came back to the redesigning the game and doing the quick decks, I wanted a game that didn't require Excel because there's a number of guys who don't do Excel, and they would email me and say, "Here's my next 5 games coming up. Can you create the charts for me?" And yeah, no problem at all. It just took a couple minutes, and I would get them a PDF back, and they print it out and carry on with their game. But they had to have it in order to play the game. So when I came up with the quick decks, I thought I have to do this and not have the need for Excel, but I still need to build in all of the things that go on with the line play and whatnot. And I was able to do that. I'm actually really happy with how it worked out for the quick decks. So all you need now is just these 2 decks of cards. You need your 2 team charts, a way to chart the game, and you're off and running. When I listened to you talk at play.com, which I really enjoyed, and Glenn Guzzo the night before, that was really the highlight, was listening to you guys talk about the industry, because we kind of get a little bit of what the industry is, but not from somebody who's so involved in it like you and Glenn are. So I really appreciate that you guys took the time to do that, and were so knowledgeable on what was going on. One of your comments right at the very end was, there's all these sports games, and they're all, there's a lot of inventors and developers out there, and everything's kind of being covered now. But the one thing that you felt there still was a need for was a play-by-play football game that took an hour to maybe an hour and a half. And that's what this is. That's exactly what Quick Decks is and what On the Turf is. And I think you asked my question, like, what was my drive? And it was like that. I want to play a game in just over an hour if I can, like a football game. And so Quick Decks actually fits that real nice.
How did you do your play testing? What were kind of your sample sizes for proving out the data? I mean, I know one video you mentioned, one of your demos, you started with the 2016 Bears, the 3-13 Bears. And yeah, I think you did some 2019, 2021, some 1976, which you can't get without the 76 season. You have to do.
The 76, which was an awesome season, right? You would think that you're going to play one of the good teams in 76. Well, I got challenged basically to play a team that wasn't very good. So being close to Seattle, I played the Seahawks because it was their inaugural year. They were 2-14, and they were 2-14 in my replay. And it felt as frustrating as it was to watch them on TV, because they would just get a drive going and Zorn would throw an interception, or they just get a drive going and there would be a fumble. And they just never could recover fumbles. And I don't know, it just was like that. So it was as frustrating as it seemed. So that was pretty happy with that. The sample size, though, from the start of 49 football, I should track how many games I've played. It's got to be in excess of 1,000 games. I play it all the time. This has been my stress relief now, is playing the games. And I'm very fortunate to have a loving wife who allows me to just go ahead and enjoy my passion like this, because we have our time where she likes to play board games too. So we'll play Wingspan or We'll play Everdale or those types of games. She loves playing those, and I like it too. But she gives me my time to play, so my sample size is really really high for playing it.
Have you ever, or do you have folks among your devotees who have conducted numerous season replays?
There are guys who have, but nobody. I didn't really get a lot of traction as far as people posting outside of just my own forum. I think this is going to be different this time because I didn't market it, and that was yeah, and this is different. So I never did anything like was interviewed about my game before. I've never talked about it to anybody other than just the guys been on the Delphi or the Facebook. So this is a little bit different to go out there. So I do have play testers who have completed seasons, and this is just recently now. I only had play testers because I wanted to test out this quick decks version quickly to make sure that it was, I hadn't broken anything when I created these decks, right? And so yeah, they created it, and my play testers they're in love with the game. They love it.
We talk about, we all have our sense of what is accurate for a
Yep.
replay. What to you are kind of the key points you mentioned about, the points that you really wanted to see in a football game? What to you are the absolute core, maybe top 3 or 5 statistical indicators that you personally need, outside of win-loss records or approximate win-loss record and season performance? What are the areas that you really need to see the most accuracy in, and what's your kind of margin of error, plus or minus, like 0.1 yard per catch or per carry, something like that?
Gosh, that's such a good question because you're right. It's so different for everybody. And if this is baseball, you better be pretty accurate. You better be at the decimal points, not a full, right? Football, you get a little more leeway because there's only, 17 games in a season now, 18 in Canada, where there's been 16 or 14 forever. So the sample size is so small, it's very hard to have that tight of a control. When I've been doing the play testing, I want to make sure that my first downs are pretty close. I want to make sure that throughout the course of a year, a running back is going to be within, zero point 0.1, zero point 0.2, zero point 0.3, but it depends on the number of carries because I don't limit their longest yard carry to whatever it was, right? Because that's doesn't ever feel realistic to me. But some guys like that, so you can play it whichever way you want too, right? But somebody that's had 70 carries in a year and his longest was 30 yards, but he breaks one in your replay for 75 yards, that's going to skew your data, right? So I want it to be pretty close. I want his yards to be pretty close through the course of the year. And I don't know what that means as far as an actual number. Same with their number of receptions. So I do make these charts. I do have solitaire charts for playing along with. So I want to make sure those, along with the, back to this chart here, this team chart, I've got player selection columns. So you can select your own player, but then you can also roll a d20. And so I've wanted to make sure that those come out right, and they really do. It's pretty good from my perspective, anyway. And I don't know, is that 5% or 3%, something like that? I would guess somewhere around there. And you do get the odd outlier, which is always fun too, and I'm okay with that.
It doesn't sound then you're as though you're a very strictly as played person. Or maybe that's not the case. I mean, Super Bowl one, do you pull Boyd Dollar and put Max McGee in all the time, or do you just let it play out?
When I get to those types of games, sometimes I will choose my own players, but for the most part, I just roll the d20 and let the charts play it. It's a good point about Max McGee.
I mean, you're not trying to recreate exactly, and you really
No.
let a game kind of create its own moments. That's kind of the whole point, right?
Yeah, and I think that's it. I think my number one would be to make sure that it feels like you're playing in a football game. That's number one. And then there's a distant number two, and that is make sure that, okay, the running backs are really close. The numbers of carries are close. The quarterback attempts are close. The the number of times he runs or gets chased out of the pocket, those types of things, those are close as well. But number one is I want this to feel like you're in the middle of a football game. And because that's what Keith does really well with his play games. Like, you're in the middle of it, but you're a spectator. I want to be in the middle of it, but I want to have some control too. So because there's no point in me recreating what Keith's already done because they're amazing. That would be crazy to do that. So I just tried to find something in the middle between this and maybe the APBA game, which is a lot more in depth. Which is I've never played it, so one of these days will be the conference you have to show me because I'm looking forward to doing that.
For sure, for sure. And you really are specific. If I saw correctly on one of your charts, the solitaire chart, according to offensive play, you have your, locators, your allocators for the different players. Are you creating those strictly from team and player data, or do you do some film watching, as it were, watching games throughout the season to take notes about usage?
It's 100% stats based. I knew that being a one man band and trying to create seasons and also wanting to finish a hockey game and do other things that I wanted it to be. I want to go to Pro Football Reference. I want to go to Stats Crew. I want to go to some of these other ones and have the data just go right into my spreadsheet and it populates it and there it is. So yeah, it's 100% stats based.
Did you address in any way era to era play or league to league play, playing the Argonauts against the Seahawks or something like that?
I have not done any of that. The game is based on the actual statistics of a team. So it'd be hard to play a CFL team against an NFL team because typically your running backs are gonna and your receivers, they average more yards per catch and more yards per carry. Completion percentages are usually, well, not anymore. They used to be a lot higher for quite a few years in the CFL. I don't know. That's such an interesting concept. You could play from year to year. One of the things I just did recently was in 1967, I played the Raiders and the Green Bay Packers. I played that game. So the AFL, NFL. Well, I did watch some video of that game on YouTube, and it wasn't that close of a game. Green Bay was, you could tell they were very dominant. They were much, much better team. The Raiders weren't bad, but not. And so when I replayed it, I have to pull up the sheet. I think the Green Bay won 24-17 or something on my replay. And it felt like there were two neutral teams battling each other, not a team that was dominant. So I guess I know I could come up with some factors that you could put into the game to play those games and make it seem a little bit more realistic. But right now, it's just based on their stats.
I'm glad you brought up the AFL because it's kind of infamous in the world of APBA that the APBA did not start carding the AFL until a 1964 season set, and they really were demoted vis-a-vis the NFL, which is maybe a bit subjective, but also if you're designing in that era, and we've talked to some folks like Mark Zarb about, having that knowledge designing, right then as the season happened versus from, 30 or 40 years away. And, as you say, watching that video, you can clearly see it, maybe not reflected always in the score, but you can tell a seasoned team that just kind of churns it out and wins all those micro battles throughout the game, right. So I just wonder about your sense of subjectivity and choices that may have to lie outside the stats, and also reflecting, say, you're the 76 Seahawks, the 76 Buccaneers, a team that just beyond the statistics really just does not have that big play capability, or there's that mistake proneness, or just that fatigue that weighs this team down.
It really does come out of the statistics. It really is reflective of that. I'll look through a team and I'll look at the stats of a team and what the ratings are, and think that this team should do a lot better. They should have won more games than they did. I just finished doing the 22 season, and there was a couple of teams in there that I thought statistically they shouldn't have been an 8-9 or 7-10 team. They should have won 10 or 11 games. But their stuff happened during the year, and then you look, oh yeah, they actually turned the ball over a lot. Oh, they actually took a lot of penalties, and so those are the types of things that are built into the game that become realistic through not maybe in an individual game, but throughout the course of the season, it'll play itself out.
And then again, that gets back to the idea of kind of overall performance and plus or minus margin of error. If you look at any NFL team, or really, well, NFL is easier, again, as you mentioned, 17 games in the NFL. You've got those swing games, maybe 3 to 5 games, where 7 points or less would dictate the outcome.
Right.
Do you weight a team that maybe was I don't know 5-11, 5-12 versus 9-7, 9-8? Is there a discernible difference, or again, is it just all it's going to play out just as that team played out?
It's going to play out just as that team played out. I actually started to do a little bit of that early on, and because I thought, a team that's got a higher winning percentage should get more of the breaks in the game. But then it started to skew a little bit too much because it's basically all in the game. Although, having said that, a lot of the older data is just not as available. So the only way that you can generate, like, NFL's good now because you can get sack data all the way back, right? But and interceptions, but quarterback pressures and other things like that. That has to come off of the points allowed, or their average number of yards per game they give up. So that it does dictate a lot of that. That does generate some of the stats through that. So, but again, that's all based on their performance throughout the year.
Another pressing issue in the APBA community. I apologize for being so centric here, but
Oh, that's fine.
the mobile quarterback, of course, back in the 80s and certainly prior to the 70s, 70s and prior, unless you're talking Bobby Douglas, the mobile quarterback was an anomaly. It was Fran Tarkenton, and that was basically it. Maybe, Bradshaw breaks a few tackles here or there. And then as we get forward to Michael Vick and, now Mahomes, I mean, the pistol, the quarterback options are all, standard procedures. So did you make any particular allowances for getting the quarterbacks their running yardage?
Yeah, definitely. And even back then, because Canadian football has always had scrambling running quarterbacks. That's always been a trademark of Canada because the field's so big. And so yes, so there definitely are. And I think the way I deal with pressure is maybe a little bit unique with this game. Every quarterback, I don't know if you can see that very well, but every quarterback is rated for their ability to run here if the defense gets pressure on them. So they're either going to get sacked or they're going to scramble away and get their pass off, but there's a modifier in the brackets there, or they're going to check it down, which is, happens a lot. They check it down to a secondary receiver, or then there's their ability to run over there. And who I even pull up here, we got, Jay Schrader. So of the 1990 Raiders. So Schrader actually ran a fair amount. He was not a scrambling quarterback. He actually lived, when I first moved to St. George, he lived 2 blocks away from me. And so I got to meet him. My wife and his wife used to hike together, and he was pretty big at that time and really sore, but he was huge. I mean, tall, like big, and like it's amazing how big these guys really are. And you're the quarterback. You're the quarterback. Like he's what 6'2" or 6'3". He was just a giant. So anyway, sidebar.
Yeah.
But anyway, so yes, it's all built into the way pressure comes into the game and the quarterback's ability to get rid of it, the ball, or to run with it. And On the Turf version has a bunch of different special plays. And one of them in the middle is the read option. And then there's also zone read. And so a quarterback is rated for, so zone read is basically, it could be just a running back. A quarterback doesn't need to be a running quarterback for zone read to work. But a lot of times they do. But the read pass option, that's all in here as well. So that's how I kind of get around it for On the Turf. For the quick decks, it's just based on pressure.
We talked a lot about fictional leagues back at play.con, and I wonder, have folks approached you with any idea of how to make your own, their own kinds of cards, take your concepts and build fictional leagues or teams?
We haven't had a lot of that conversation, but I have a couple guys who do that because I give them a spreadsheet. So each of these team charts is generated from a spreadsheet. And so if they buy a season, if they want the spreadsheet, because that way they can put logos on it and they can do some different things with it. So yeah, if they're savvy a little bit with Excel, then they can do that kind of stuff. It would be fun. I mean, I'm part of the play.com and their baseball America League. I started a little group and there's 12 of us. Each of us takes one of the 12 fictional teams in their baseball America League. We play a 44 game season each year, and it's so fun, from year to year, seeing how the guys change. And Keith has them changing teams, and because they become free agents and whatnot. So yeah, that's all fun. I think I'll just for now stick with the real stuff. just because it's so, it's just me right now.
In terms of NFL seasons or particularly great teams of the past, have you had any? Do you have any on your immediate horizon, or some that folks are clamoring for more than others?
I think that's about to come. I mean, right now I've got 76, 83, 90, 98, 2013, and then 2016 on for NFL seasons. So captured a few of them. I've got 67 just about done. I've got the AFL done because I played through the Raiders 67 season. I wanted to see how that would go. Because they were pretty dominant. Are they going to be dominant in that AFL? And they were. So the game's on pre-order right now. I've got almost all the components, just waiting for cards and dice to show up. In the next week or two, I'll be starting to fulfill orders. And then, once I get into a routine of that, then I'll be like, okay, guys, what's next for a season? What are you guys looking for? So I think I'll learn more about that soon. Canadian football, I've got a lot of seasons done. Amazing amount of seasons. It's easier because there's only 9 teams. And there's not as much data though. You made it, mention earlier that, with all the advanced analytics that's going on in the NFL, and you threw CFL in there. CFL this year made a change to the way they're capturing data, and they've got a new company doing it, and it's a nightmare. It's so hard trying to get data from the CFL for this year, and all the old seasons from the CFL.ca website is all wiped out. It's
Wow, wow. Well, I remember, yeah, they were trying to make data proprietary at one point, weren't they? I think the
yeah,
NFL was, yeah. So
yeah.
that's in terms of your favorites, CFL. You mentioned you played the Seahawks in the NFL, and Gayle Sayers was you're a Bears fan. What about your favorite Canadian team or teams?
BC Lions, because I grew up near Vancouver, and so I had an uncle who used to go to all the games, and we used to talk about the BC Lions all the time. So yeah, that was my team.
You must have attended a CFL game in person. How about compared to like an NFL game? The atmosphere, the tailgating, stuff like that.
It's way different. I mean, NFL games are the tailgating is like part of it, a big part of it. CFL games, not so much. I've never been to Winnipeg or Saskatchewan. I understand those are pretty crazy tailgating places, but I've been to those are the only two I've never been to. So I've been to every other stadium in the CFL for CFL games, and they're fun. The crowds are pretty into it. The stadiums are depend on the stadium. Like Vancouver Stadium, it's a 55,000 seat stadium, and they'll get 20 to 25,000 people. So they finally, I don't know, maybe a dozen years ago or so ago, they blocked the whole upper deck off, so it looks like there's actually some people at the game now. It's just fun because you're watching your own team play, I guess. But NFL is, yeah, it's way louder. Yeah, nothing compares to a game in Seattle. The Seahawks. It's just like deafening, crazy loud. So yeah, just different experience.
Your hockey game is end to end hockey.
Yeah,
In one video, I'd seen that you were working with someone to get your hockey game done in PC.
there's a developer in England who's been working on it. Yeah, we'll see how that goes. The hardest part with hockey is, well, with any sport for PC, is not the action on the ice. That's pretty easy to pick up and to adapt from a board game, or from even just go first principles. It's pretty easy to adapt. But who's in the lineup? Who plays with who? Who's injured today? Who got traded? All that management. Oh man, it's a nightmare. And then trying to keep players to playing their approximate number of minutes per game. Yeah, yeah, it's really hard. It's easier to do on a tabletop because you don't track those things because it's too much work, right? So you just kind of roll with the lines. But as soon as you go to a PC, it opens everything up to you. It's kind of like what I said earlier about, like, if I'm playing a PC game and a guy's got an outside run and he's got a real high chance of getting there, and oh, he got 2 yards, and you're just going to say that he got 2 yards. You're not going to tell me what happened. Come on, don't be lazy. Tell me what happened. I'm being lazy on my end because I'm watching the game happen, right?
Your golf and your hockey game and your foot racing game, are these completely ground up mechanics? Is there anything that will translate from one game to another in your design methodology?
Wow. They're all ground up. The hockey game is going to translate into a soccer game. So yeah, that's about it though. Everything else is kind of ground up, but it's, I guess my design, philosophy or whatever. My starting point is always like I did with the football game. I make it like just so big and then whittle it down. I did that with hockey as well. And it's like, okay, how do I make this so it's actually playable and potentially enjoyable, right? I wanted a game. Again, Hockey Blast is a really fun, really good game. I didn't need to reinvent it. I played Status Pro hockey once a long, long time ago, and that was, oh, this is kind of cool. But I'm from Canada. I bleed hockey, right? I'm born in Canada, so while it captured what's going on in a hockey game, it didn't really tell me what was going on in the hockey game. So I thought I want one that's kind of like the football. I think you call like a play-by-play football game. I wanted a play-by-play hockey game. Start off, flow through the whole game. No lull minutes or anything like that because something's still going to happen. Although there are times in the game where not much is happening, but there's still potential. You're still checking people's abilities and how they're playing a game, or if some aggression going on or whatever. So the hockey game though will fit nicely into soccer. It just fits nicely. I don't think there's anything else that fits nicely into football. Actually, that's not true. It's not a sports game. It'd be and a total sidebar of the games I'm working on right now, but it's like a war game. There is a war game that is just waiting for all the stuff to be finished, and it's going to take a lot of the elements of what I do with a football game to be in a war game. Because typical war games are back and forth, right? And that's
Right.
kind of like what football is.
It's that
Yeah.
George Foreman routine. Football is like, marching down the field and taking territory and all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And Blood Bowl. Yeah. Yeah. So awesome. That answered my other question about what other games you're working on. So there you go. In terms of randomization of results, do you have any particular tips or tricks there? Anything unique to what you demand in terms of range of outcomes?
When I first started developing and designing, D6s were pretty plentiful. I spent quite a bit of time with my business in the quality control aspect of it. So when I moved to the States, gosh, 20 years ago now, wow, to St. George from Canada, we created I brought technology to the US to create these called germanium wafers, and they get used to grow solar cells on, and they're used in the satellites. So a lot of the satellites that we're seeing above has a little part of what's going on here in St. George. In order to get a product to go up into space, you have to document the heck out of it and test the heck out of it and prove that you've done all that. And you get auditors come in and they're always, in your space all the time. So, that quality control aspect of it was important. So that's a bit of a segue to back to my D6. And D6s have an inherent problem. If you don't roll them, if you roll it the same way all the time, you can expect to get the same results. And if you're playing a simulation and you think the results aren't what they should be, start looking at what you're using for dice, because that could be it, or the way you're rolling a dice. And just because you have a dice tower, speaking of towers, Steve Tower put me onto this one, which I love because it's nice and quiet. My wife comes into my office to watch TV, so I like to play games. So I have a nice quiet dice tower. But even that, you can manipulate the rolls depending how you put it in. That would be a tip. And so when I designed the games, I wanted a dice that would roll more than the D6. If you drop a D6 on the corner, if you have a spongy surface you're dropping it on, you're probably going to get a pretty random distributed results. So that went with a D12. And so a D12 gives you about an 8%, 8.3%, I think it is. Rolling a 1 is 8%, 2 is 16%, and 1, 2. And a D20 is 5%. So you can get some different variation there. So rather than, a D6, which is a 1 in 6 chance, right? So that's 17%. So that's why I designed all of my games around D12s and D20s. And, for instance, with the field goal kickers so here's a kicking chart for the 90 Raiders team. And you can see along the kicking row, there's 2 cells. There's the top and the bottom. So, if a guy has a 97% chance of kicking a field goal, well, even a D20 is going to get 95% or it's going to get 100%, right? So that's why I put in the second row, to be able to capture the difference between 95 and 100. So for things like field goal kicking, where you want to be pretty accurate, and what the second roll does too is you roll the first dice. And so what have we got here? Let's go. So it's Jeff Jagger. and his 30 to 39 shows that a 1 to 13, he makes it the first time round. Well, if he doesn't make it, then he's got a secondary chance, and it's what, a 1 to 6. So you roll the dice again if it's a 1 to 6 and he makes it. Well, it's a little bit of tension that builds up there because, he kicks it and, maybe the wind caught it or he puts some English on it and you roll the 1 to 6 and you make it, or you don't. And it's like, bum, that kind of thing. So the variability is, yeah, that's why I like the D12 and I like the D20.
I'm so glad you mentioned that because that's, one of our regional tournament directors, Jack Dolan, does the Chula's Joe Jackson tournament that just wrapped up in South Carolina, the second one. And he has a very, specific, you have to really shake the dice. You can't just kind of wiggle the shaker. We use shakers on APBA a lot of times. And I've heard folks talk about casino dice and the sharper edges and things like that. So very interesting points. Oh, thank you, sir. I mean, I think that that's an incredible look into your methodology. We really appreciate the insights. Is there any last thought you'd like to give? You talked about our discussions at Play.con about the future of gaming, and you mentioned that you and your wife will play Wingspan and Euro style games. Is there anything from your perspective about the future of tabletop sports games, whether it's younger players or more seasoned players, folks who have more disposable income and time and desire to spend more time with games?
I'm not sure how it's going to translate to sports board games. Certainly, the board game industry is really exploding. We thought maybe a few years ago it was a bubble and it was, going to burst, but it's not the case. There's some just really big companies who've come in, like Asmodee, and there's, a couple other companies that are doing like really great work. So you can buy a board game now for $50 and it's got amazing components in it. It's got double layer boards and the cards are really great quality. And so that's going to keep driving that. I don't know how we get that down to the sports board game to get that kind of quality because it's just, we don't have the volume. Dice Tower West, Keith and I were this past March, Keith and I were talking about the differences with like the war game industry, because I said, like war games could be really like your play games could really fit into that war game niche. Said, and by the way, that niche is probably 10 times the size of our sports game industry that we're in too. And so I don't think it's going to go away, which is good. It's interesting right now how many different people are coming up with their own designs. And because you can print at home and make pretty decent quality yourself, a lot of guys are doing that. And that was a real dilemma when I first decided to sell 49 football back in 2017 was, so I can do this and I can buy a printer and I can go to a local print shop and I know how to buy components and try and pack it together that seems worthy of $30 or $40. But there's other guys out there who are doing this, trying to do it for a living, and I'm doing this kind of as a aid to my retirement. Is that fair? And I don't know what the answer to that is. I really don't. I think if anybody's got a passion to do something, this is a free country. You should take that passion and go do something. So I thought, well, maybe I'll give it away for free, and you just charge for some seasons. I thought that didn't seem very fair to me either, to the guys who are trying to make a living. Because if I've got a product that's worthy of $30 and they're selling one that's $30, but I don't charge anything for it, that didn't seem right. So I don't know. That's just a little insight to where my brain was at the time and kind of where it's at right now. So I think it's really cool. I love being at Play because there was a few different guys who were showing up from different games. I got to see some different options. SK's college game. Man, talk about a guy who is passionate about what he does. It's amazing how much effort he's put into that game. Is that game going to catch on? I bet you's got a real good chance because the way he's come up with a rating system so that you can play, like you asked, like, can you play different seasons or different leagues? Well, he's worked that out and it's all based on data. And he's done the research himself to get the data, which is crazy. So it's kind of fun industry to be in. I think the time of the industry they're in is really cool. Yeah. We're going to keep seeing more and more stuff. I don't know that we're ever going to see the sports game industry ever even get close to where the war game industry is right now. Right. But I guess time will tell.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, you never know. We like I said, we got them right where we want them. We got, there's tons of sports fans. It's just, connecting with them, and with designers with fresh approaches like yourself and SD Patrick, and very thoughtful about your approach from beginning to end. Just very optimistic. I think we should all be optimistic. And Grant Fines, designer to watch for sure. Check them out. You have your website. We'll point to that in the description. Are there any other platforms that you're on, or you suggest people reach out to you?
Yeah, they can reach out to me. I've got an email. It's grant.fines@icloud.com. 49 Sports Game website. And then Facebook is 49 Football.
Perfect. And the 2022 NFL season is here. Can't wait.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you, sir.